Today we're starting the second painting of our series, Seaside. This is a painting of a quiet harbor, and I'd like to talk about and related to tonal contrast and talk about the big mid-value. The mid-value is, as it would seem, it's the between the light and dark in your painting, sort of the middle tones, middle strength tones. And when we're simplifying tones, we think light, medium, dark. And in most painting, nearly all painting, the dominant tone is the midtone. Now it can be a light midtone, it can be a dark midtone, but the painter sees the midtone as sort of the dominant tone in the painting. And that's the concept that I'll talk about throughout this demonstration. Here you see me doing a series of graded washes. I started up above with a mid-tone in the sky and added some clouds. And I left a bright area on the horizon that I echoed in the water. And then I dropped another mid-tone into the water and darkened it up towards the bottom of the painting. This was all done wet into wet. It's a great practice for us, these graded washes. Graded wash in the top in the sky and a graded wash below in the water. And working with one color is a real plus because you're not trying to match colors, you're not trying to adjust colors, you're just thinking how light, how dark. And you can give 100% of your attention to what's going on with the media itself. How is it blending? How is it drying? Etc. This is an advantage. So we're proceeding our color painting with this tonal study, and you can see I've gotten quite dark in the areas that will be representing boats. And it looks quite dark. It's going to dry a bit lighter, but and we'll actually add some darks to that as it's drying. I'm creating the shapes of the boats. They're pointed towards us, so the shape is a little unusual. And then I'm dragging some of that same color into the water, which is still a little damp, or into the sky, using the tip of a really nice squirrel mop brush. This brush has a really fine tip that allows me to not only paint the big shapes of the boats or the land, but at the same time I can now use the fine tip of that brush. This is a trademark of a really good brush. If it can carry a lot of water in one instance and then give you a fine mark with its tip, it's a great brush. So we've done our tonal study. Let's now move on to the color study. We're going to be creating sort of it was a dramatic tonal study, right? It had a certain amount of drama, and we're going to evoke sort of a dawn feeling to this painting, meaning we're going to use some pretty strong yellows, oranges, and even a bit of white in the sky to generate this feeling that dawn is just breaking. One thing that I'm trying to do here is compartmentalize the painting. I want to get the work done in a small area before moving on, in this case, the sky. And it benefits this technique, which is wet into wet. I've added cadmium yellow, cadmium orange into the sky, and now I'm starting up at the top right corner with a little cobalt blue, medium strength. And then as I come down, I've thickened the paint quite a bit using a little bit of extra cobalt blue and a little bit of that cadmium red mixed together on the palette. What I'm trying to generate here is darkness above the light horizon so that I can express a little bit of that breaking sun. Should be noted I'm working on an angle, so the colors are flowing downhill a little bit. If they've moved too much, I can flatten out the board and stop that. If I want it to run a little more, I'll put a steeper incline. But look at how the colors have mixed on the paper. The red is coming through the blue, the yellow's coming through the red, white of the paper coming through that light blue up on top. And as that dries, it's going to be even more pronounced and I feel more beautiful. So this is the second compartment in the painting, the second stage. I'm working on dry paper, but I'm going to try and with this yellow wash, now we've wet the whole paper, and we're going to complete this part of the painting with wet washes. I'm echoing some of that beautiful beautiful cobalt blue that's in the sky. I'm putting that into the water now. And at the same moment, or shortly after, I'm starting to build up the tonality of that cloud. It's reflected in the water. We'll leave some of that original orange and yellow, and we'll leave some of that original cobalt blue, but we're going to get quite dark towards the bottom of the painting to give us a feeling of the water coming close to us. So I'm using more of that blue-gray, a gray made by cobalt blue and a little bit of cadmium red. And it's gaining the quality of a sunset, isn't it, as I'm watching it kind of blend in front of me. A few strokes. Look at these strokes here. These are meant to give us a feeling of the gentle waves that we'll feel in a body of water that's like a harbor, a closed body of water. All applied while the surface is wet. And they're going to soften out. They're going to become less dramatic as it dries, but we're getting a feeling now of that distant light, distant edge to the water, and the water's coming towards us because of that graded wash. And this is basically how I express the mid-value. I know there's literally thousands of values in the painting at this moment, and will continue to be. But as I look at it, I'm seeing one value. I'm seeing that mid-value that's sky and water, made up of many colors and many values, but we generalize. We're associating like values. The artist does this a lot, and it's a very good way to simplify the complexity of nature and give yourself an approach. It's also a good way to design your painting, this big mid-value. So I'm adding some rich darks now. These rich darks, again, they're representing the boats and the pier, and later will be carried up into the sky and down into the water as the masts come off of the boats. So I'm generating the shapes of those boats, much like small rectangles that have a point to the top, and I'm bringing them down into the water. I've left a lot of space in the water because this accentuates that feeling of reflections, and calm reflections are essential if you're painting a kind of calm morning. You want to generate that sort of mood or atmosphere. These sorts of long reflections give you that. You see, I just made the first of what will be many masts. And the page is actually still half wet. If you can appreciate what's happening here, the strokes they're dissolving in places. And this is perfect. This is better than I planned. The wetness of the surface in places is giving me a softer feeling to those verticals. In other places, the paper's dried and I get a real sharp, distinct mark. So this is a result of good timing. Placing those strokes at the right time, and you get the sort of play of edges, lost and found edges, actually. The edge gets lost in some cases, and then where it hits dry paper, we see it again. Up above, the paper is fairly dry, so we can execute some dry brush or, some very strong, hard-edged strokes for our masts. These strokes are a little difficult. You want to get them straight as much as possible. I like them best when they're broken. In other words, it's not a continually a continual line of the same thickness, but it has places where the stroke gets a little thinner or a little darker or a little thicker, even though in reality it is of uniform width. In painting, it looks better, especially when the light's coming through those. It tends to feel like the light is so intense that it's actually fragmenting the masts. So a lot of nuance in these marks that we're making. I realize that as I'm explaining it, that it's effective for many reasons, this breaking up of strokes. Some small touches to finish off the painting, and it's having that finished quality. Well, I guess we got to put a couple seagulls in there to give us a feeling of, the location. Seagulls are very present in the morning light, and that's our painting.